So I brought a little prop with me today. Just picture a standard old-fashioned pocket watch on a gold chain.
Oh boy.
I'm going to start swinging it back and forth right in front of your face. Look deep into my eyes, keep watching the watch, getting very sleepy. And when I snap my fingers, you're going to cluck like a chicken.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on the poultry impressions today. Though I guess if you have a highly classified secret spy mission, that sounds mildly tempting.
Come on, it's classic Hollywood.
Oh.
I mean, I'm giving you peak cinematic brainwashing right here. We've got, the sleeper agents from the Manchurian Candidate, the intense past life regressions from Dead Again.
Right.
Or even, like, that ridiculous comedic mind control Woody Allen did in The Curse of the Jade Scorpion. If you've ever watched a movie, you know the tropes. The swinging pendulum, the spiral eyes, the total irreversible loss of free will.
It is completely hardwired into our culture at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
we have this collective image of the hypnotist as this dark magician who's like pulling the strings of a helpless puppet.
But today, we are leaving the movie theater behind and heading straight into the laboratory. Welcome to the Deep Dive Lab.
Happy to be here to sort fact from fiction.
And man, we have a lot to sort through. So here's the mission for this deep dive. We are taking a massive stack of recent scientific literature, clinical trials, neuroimaging studies, all of it to explore the real science of clinical hypnosis. Our goal is to completely separate those spooky stage magic myths from the actual evidence-based neurobiology. We really want to know what is physically happening inside the brain when someone goes under.
And what's really fascinating about that stack of research is the contrast, because pop culture treats hypnosis as this magical loss of willpower, but modern science reveals it as a powerful, entirely natural mechanism for emotional regulation and pain management.
Wow, so it's not a loss of control.
Not at all. It's actually about gaining a profoundly different type of control over your own nervous system.
Let's unpack that, because before we can even touch the brain scans,
Yeah.
we really have to bulldoze through decades of Hollywood hexes.
Yeah, we do.
I was reading this massive joint study that recently brought together researchers from Binghamton University, Harvard Medical School, Goldsmiths at the University of London, and Ohio State.
That's a powerhouse group.
Right.
Yeah.
And they published this comprehensive review in Applied Cognitive Psychology just to put a stake in all these misconceptions.
Yeah.
They targeted 21 major myths.
21 is a lot, but honestly, it's necessary. The scientific community has been actively working to clean up this reputation for a while now.
Yeah.
And the most damaging myth they tackle in that Lin and colleagues paper is the idea that hypnosis is a trance where you just surrender your free will. Or, the idea that the practitioner possesses some sort of mystical power over you.
Like a superpower.
Exactly. And both of those concepts are objectively false. Hypnosis is not something done to you. It's a collaborative state.
Right. I saw the American Psychological Association actually has a very grounded definition for it in plain English.
They do.
They call it a state of consciousness involving focused attention and reduced peripheral awareness, combined with an enhanced capacity to respond to suggestion.
Yes.
And the huge caveat there is that it requires the voluntary participation of the patient. Like you literally cannot be hypnotized against your will.
The voluntary aspect is the absolute linchpin. I mean, if you don't want to participate, the process simply doesn't work.
Let me try to put this focused attention and reduced peripheral awareness thing into a real-world context for you listening. Think about the last time you went to see a gripping, visually stunning blockbuster movie in an IMAX theater.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Or like maybe you were reading a fantastic, unputdownable thriller on an airplane. You get so intensely engrossed in the story, the characters, the world, that somebody could walk right up to you, call your name, and you literally do not hear them.
Right, you tune it all out.
Exactly. The world outside the screen or the page just fades away. You haven't lost your free will in that moment. Your attention is just hyper-focused.
And to take your movie theater analogy a step further, you haven't surrendered your autonomy to the movie director either. You simply allowed your attention to narrow so completely that your peripheral awareness of the real world just, drops offline. You're fully absorbed. In a clinical setting, a hypnotherapist is essentially the projectionist. They are guiding you into that exact same state of profound absorption, but instead of directing your focus toward a fictional story, they're directing it toward therapeutic suggestions.
So things like feeling less pain.
Right, or regulating your breathing, lowering your heart rate, things like that.
Okay, that makes so much more sense than the swinging pocket watch. But I have to admit, I'm a naturally skeptical person.
Most people are when it comes to this.
The psychological explanation is great, but if I put a hypnotized person in an MRI machine, Is their brain actually doing something different? Or are they just sitting there relaxing really hard? Like, what does this hyper-focused state actually look like under the hood?
That is where the neurobiology comes in, and I have to say the imaging is pretty undeniable. But to understand the scans, we first have to look at how the brain organizes information.
Okay, lay it on me.
There's a framework called the triple network model. This was extensively mapped out in a recent paper by Dali Jija and a team from the University of Montreal and the University of Queensland. They published this in Complementary Therapies and Clinical Practice.
The triple network model. I mean, it sounds a bit like a corporate IT structure.
It functions like one too, honestly.
Hmm.
Without getting buried in anatomical jargon, you can think of the brain as operating via three main interconnected networks. First up is the default mode network.
Okay.
This is your brain's daydreaming center. It's active when you're not focused on the outside world. It's what turns on when your mind is wandering, when you're ruminating on the past, or, projecting into the future.
Ah, so the default mode network is my brain's idle mode, which for me, and probably a lot of people listening, means it's the thing that wakes me up at 3 a.m. to endlessly loop over some embarrassing thing I said 5 years ago.
Yes. That is exactly your default mode network, running completely unchecked. It's heavily involved in our internal anxiety loops.
Great. Love that for us.
Right. So the second network is the executive control network. Think of this as the decision maker, the analytical boss of the brain that handles complex problem-solving and goal-directed behavior.
Okay, so we have the daydreamer and the boss.
Exactly. And finally, you have the salience network.
Salience meaning importance. So what's its job in the company?
The salience network is the brain's bouncer.
The bouncer.
Yeah. Millions of bits of sensory data are bombarding you every single second. The temperature of the room, the hum of the refrigerator, the feeling of your shoes on your feet. The salience network stands at the door of your consciousness and decides which of those inputs are actually important enough to pass along to the executive control network.
Got it. So we have the daydreamer looping our anxieties, the boss making decisions, and the bouncer filtering the noise. What happens to this whole corporate structure when someone actually gets hypnotized?
Well, when you look at functional MRI scans during clinical hypnosis, the default mode network, that self-monitoring anxiety looping center, significantly quiets down.
Yeah.
The activity visibly drops. At the exact same time, the connectivity between the executive control network and the salience network shifts. The brain literally alters its own criteria for what it considers important.
Wait, let me unpack this. So you're saying the brain is actively rewiring its communication lines in real time. It's telling the bouncer to change the VIP list.
Essentially, yes. The functional connectivity changes. The brain alters its own traffic patterns. And the neuroimaging reveals one more crucial detail. During hypnosis, we consistently see a distinct activation of a region called the lingual gyrus.
Lingual gyrus. I mean, that sounds like it should be connected to language or speech, right?
It's a bit of a misnomer, actually. It handles higher order visual processing and visual memory. So when the lingual gyrus lights up during hypnosis, it helps explain why the mental imagery experienced in that state feels incredibly viscerally real. If the hypnotherapist suggests you're resting on a peaceful beach, you aren't just, thinking about a beach. Your brain's visual processing centers are firing as if you are physically seeing the ocean.
That is wild. Okay, let me try to piece this together. It sounds like the brain is acting like a complex soundboard in a high-end recording studio.
I like that.
Under normal circumstances, you've got a dozen tracks playing at once. You've got the background hum, the anxiety track, the sensory input. But hypnosis comes in and, it pulls the volume fader way down on the default mode network and mutes the background anxiety and the self-doubt.
Right, and as that fader goes down...
The fader for the lingual gyrus and these internal suggestions gets cranked all the way up. So the internal imagery actually feels louder and more real than the outside world.
That's spot on. You're muting the extraneous noise and isolating a single track. And if you understand that soundboard mechanism, you really understand why clinical hypnosis is stepping out of the shadows and becoming a legitimate tool in mainstream medicine.
Because you're taking control of the dials.
Exactly. If you can turn down the volume on anxiety and change how the salience network decides what to pay attention to, you can actually turn down the volume on physical illness.
And this is the part of the research that completely blew my mind. If you're listening to this and you deal with chronic health issues, This is where it gets incredibly relevant for you. We're talking about tangible medical results here.
We really are, and we have the data to back it up now. We aren't relying on anecdotes from stage shows anymore. There is a massive, highly rigorous meta-analysis by Thompson and colleagues, and it was published in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews.
Okay.
They analyzed 85 controlled trials encompassing over 3,600 participants.
Wow, you cannot argue with 3,600 participants across 85 trials. What was the bottom line?
They found that clinical hypnosis can reduce pain by a staggering 42% for highly suggestible people.
42%. That is nearly cutting your physical pain in half, just from a practitioner talking to you. How is that even physically possible without a pharmaceutical?
It really comes down to understanding the difference between the sensation of pain and the suffering of pain.
Oh, interesting distinction.
Yeah, hypnosis doesn't just act as a psychological distraction. The brain imaging shows it actively modulates a region called the anterior cingulate cortex.
The anterior cingulate cortex. What does that specifically do?
So if you touch a hot stove, the somatosensory cortex processes the physical location and intensity of the burn, the actual ouch part of it. But the anterior cingulate cortex encodes the effect of the pain. It's the part that generates the emotional suffering, the feeling of, this is agonizing and terrible.
Right, the panic.
Exactly. Hypnosis physically alters how that emotional effect is encoded. The physical signal from the nerve might still reach the brain, but the brain's emotional distress reaction to it is completely muffled.
So the data still arrives, but the bouncer at the door, the salience network, just looks at the pain signal and says, yeah, we aren't going to panic about this right now.
Precisely.
That's unbelievable. And I saw it's replacing heavy pharmaceutical sedatives in some surgical procedures. But it isn't just for acute things like surgery, right? I saw some incredible stats in the sources about chronic gut issues.
Oh, yeah. One of the most surprising and highly effective applications today is in the treatment of irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS.
Which is notoriously difficult to treat. I mean, IBS causes severe chronic gastrointestinal pain, cramping, bloating. For a lot of people, the standard medications either don't work or they come with terrible side effects. But why would a brain-based therapy work on the stomach?
To understand that, you really have to look at the gut-brain axis. The gut has its own incredibly complex nervous system, the enteric nervous system, which is often called the second brain.
Right, I've heard that.
And it's constantly communicating with the brain in your head. If your brain is chronically stressed or trapped in an anxiety loop, it sends distress signals down to the gut, which can trigger inflammation, cramping, and hypersensitivity.
So if your default mode network is constantly spinning, your gut is basically absorbing all that collateral damage.
Precisely. Gut-directed hypnotherapy steps in to act as a translator. By quieting the brain's distress networks and providing specific calming imagery regarding the digestive tract, it sends a powerful stand-down signal to the gut. The studies show this treatment has a number needed to treat, or NNT, of about 5.
An NNT of 5. For the listener who isn't reading medical journals every day, what does that mean in practical terms?
Sure. So in medical research, the number needed to treat tells you how many people you need to give a therapy to in order for one person to see a significant, measurable clinical benefit. An NNT of 5 is considered an incredibly strong intervention. It means for every 5 IBS patients who undergo gut-directed hypnotherapy, one experiences long-term relief from severe symptoms that couldn't be achieved with standard medical care alone. And it has virtually 0 negative side effects.
That is huge.
It is. It's also proving highly effective as an adjunct therapy. When you pair hypnosis with cognitive behavioral therapy for depression and anxiety, the clinical outcomes improve significantly compared to CBT alone.
I am having a genuine moment of amazement here. We live in a society where the immediate reflex is to reach for a pill for absolutely everything. The fact that a completely non-pharmacological treatment, literally just guided words, focus, and breathing, can effectively treat chronic gut inflammation, ease severe anxiety, and replace sedatives. I mean, it really feels like finding a cheat code for the human body.
It definitely challenges our conventional medical paradigms. The mind is a much heavier lever than we usually give it credit for. But we should probably address a very specific detail you caught a moment ago.
Oh, right. When you mentioned the Thompson meta-analysis, you said there was a 42% pain reduction for highly suggestible people. I wanted to circle back to that. What does that mean? Are some people just immune to this? Am I a Jedi and the rest of the population are just normal droids?
Well, it brings us to the concept of the suggestibility spectrum. Hypnotic suggestibility isn't a measure of gullibility, and it doesn't mean you have a weak mind. It's a stable, trait-like individual difference in how your brain functions.
Okay, so how do they measure it?
Clinicians measure it using standardized scales, the most famous being the Harvard Group Scale of Hypnotic Susceptibility.
So it's a literal test you can take. What does the test look like?
It involves experiencing a standard hypnotic induction, and then the practitioner observes how your body responds to a series of suggestions. For example, they might suggest your arm is becoming incredibly heavy like lead, or that there's an irresistible magnetic pull drawing your hands together.
And based on how intensely you feel those things, you get a score.
Yes, and the population breaks down into a fairly consistent bell curve. About 10 to 15% of people are what we call highs, highly suggestible individuals who can experience profound hypnotic phenomena very easily. Another 15 to 20% are lows, meaning they are highly resistant to hypnotic suggestion. And the vast majority of us, around 70%, sit somewhere in the middle.
Okay, so if I take this Harvard scale and find out I'm a high, why am I a high? Is it a personality trait? Where does it come from?
Science has actually found a physical genetic link for this. Brain imaging and genetic studies have tied hypnotic suggestibility to polymorphisms in the COMT gene.
The COMT gene, is that related to attention? Because earlier we were talking about how hypnosis is basically extreme hyperfocus.
You hit the nail on the head. The COMT gene is responsible for producing an enzyme that breaks down dopamine in the brain's prefrontal cortex.
Oh.
And dopamine is heavily involved in attention, focus, and cognitive flexibility. Because of variations in this specific gene, some people naturally maintain different levels of dopamine in their prefrontal cortex. That physical difference primes their brain to be more capable of entering that hyper-focused, absorbed state.
That's crazy.
So your ability to be hypnotized is partially hereditary. It's written in your DNA.
That's fascinating. But let's say I draw the short straw genetically. Let's say I'm in that 15 to 20% of lows. Am I just locked out of all these medical benefits? No 42% pain reduction for me.
Not necessarily. While the trait is stable, it isn't set in stone. Research shows that even if you naturally score as a low, training programs can shift your suggestibility score upward.
Really? How does that work?
Well, if a practitioner works with you to increase positive expectations, dismantle your fears about the process, and train your ability to absorb yourself in imagery, you can improve. If you actively want to participate, you can train your brain to become more receptive to those soundboard adjustments we talked about.
So it's a mix of nature and nurture. You might be born with a certain baseline, but with practice, you can get better at accessing the state.
It is a skill that can be cultivated, even if your genetic starting line is a bit further back.
I feel like we've covered a massive amount of ground today, completely destroying everything Hollywood taught me about mind control. To wrap this up for the listener, how would you synthesize all this literature into a few clear takeaways?
If we distill the research, there are 3 clear takeaways you should remember. Number 1, hypnosis is absolutely nothing like the mind control myths seen in movies. You don't lose your free will. It is a safe, collaborative state of hyper-focused attention.
Crucial point.
Number 2, it is not just a placebo or positive thinking. It produces measurable physical changes in the brain's large-scale networks, quieting the default mode network and physically altering how we process pain and emotions.
Right.
And number 3, it's a highly effective, evidence-based medical treatment for conditions ranging from surgical pain to IBS, though your personal success may depend on a mix of your genetic traits and your willingness to train the skill.
Those are fantastic takeaways. And looking at the big picture here, the overarching theme of this deep dive is pretty inspiring. We spend so much time in modern society thinking of the mind and the body as 2 completely separate entities. A physical problem requires a physical pill.
Right, that's the default assumption.
But the science of clinical hypnosis proves that's a false dichotomy. The fact that a state of focused attention can literally alter our physical reality, shutting off pain receptors, calming an inflamed digestive tract, it reminds us of the profound, largely untapped power that resides within our own neurobiology. We literally have a pharmacy inside our own heads. We just have to learn how to communicate with it.
That's a great way to frame it. The mind-body connection isn't some abstract metaphor, it's an anatomical reality.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us in the Deep Dive Lab today. We hope you learned as much as we did, and that the next time you see a swinging pocket watch in a movie, you can confidently roll your eyes and tell whoever you're watching it with about the default mode network. If you enjoyed this journey into the science of the mind, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for your time.
And as we sign off, I'd like to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If our brains come pre-installed with a software override that can turn off severe physical pain just through the power of guided focus, what other hidden capacities are sitting dormant inside your head right now, just waiting for the right suggestion to unlock them?